Hi, welcome back to the Life Secret channels. Right now, I'm going to talk about the brain connect and the human revolution, the subconsciousness, and the dot. How we connect, how we are smarter, how we make the dot for our knowledge and information. As we like to study and developing our knowledge and to understand subconsciousness physically in our brain and deep inside feeling and understanding. It's too exciting to know that human we can revolution to be a smarter from 1 million thousand year and what will going to happen next when humans developing in 50 year or 10 year. We also can listen for the scientists and people who study about this. Let's see.
Universe that involves suffering, which is the very opposite of neutral observation. While observation tries to capture the present reality as objectively as possible, at the core of any experience of suffering is a rejection of present reality. We might well define consciousness as the capacity to suffer. This approach also highlights the crucial political and ethical implications of the science of consciousness. Since consciousness is linked to suffering, questions like what is consciousness and who has consciousness have a deep impact on ethic, politics, and the law, as is apparent in debates about abortion, animal rights, and the legal status of AI. The study of consciousness is not just a scientific enterprise. It is also an ethical and political enterprise. Questions like what is consciousness and who has consciousness have a deep impact on ethics and politics, on law, and on the moral choices we make every day. Therefore, as scholars of consciousness, we should be aware of the political consequences or potential consequences of what we are researching and of what we are publishing. We have a heavy responsibility. In particular, we should remember that flawed scientific theories can have dangerous political fallout. Just think about the impact of erroneous theories regarding race and gender. When a century ago, scientists argued that Europeans constitute a superior race or that homosexuality is a sickness, these bogus theories did not remain confined to laboratories and seminar rooms. They had a terrible destructive impact on the lives of billions of people outside the academic ivory tower. Adopting a political perspective is not just a matter of responsibility. It can also advance scientific work. This may sound counterintuitive because mixing politics with science is usually bad for science. But consciousness is a special case. A political outlook might actually help us make sense of the various scientific theories of consciousness. At present, there are several competing scientific theories of consciousness. Sometimes it is difficult to understand what they really mean and how they differ from one another. Examining their potential political consequences can clarify the differences between these various theories. As an essential first step, let's start with a definition of consciousness. What is consciousness? This is, of course, a controversial and confusing question, perhaps the most confusing question in the whole of science. Some argue that it's absolutely impossible to define consciousness. Others offer a bewildering list of different definitions. But from a political and ethical perspective, the definition of consciousness is extremely simple and extremely concrete. From a political and ethical perspective, consciousness is characterized by the potential to suffer. Consciousness is the capacity to suffer. Conscious entities, like you and me, can suffer, which is why we are ethical and political subjects. What happens to conscious entities is a matter of ethics and politics. Stones, tables, and cars don't have consciousness. They cannot suffer, and are therefore not ethical or political subjects. They are mere objects. Stealing my car is a crime not because it makes the car suffer, but because it makes me suffer. The link between consciousness and suffering, and between consciousness and politics, manifests itself in numerous political debates in the modern world. Modern societies assume that political authority ultimately rests on having consciousness and being able to suffer. To be entitled to a voice in politics, you need the ability to feel pain and fear, as well as pleasure and joy. Describing your experiences of pain and fear is often a necessary prelude for making your voice heard on questions ranging from race and gender to ecology and taxation. I feel, therefore I am entitled to speak. This was not always the case. In many pre-modern societies, political authority had little to do with feelings. Authority did not come from our inner feelings, it came from outside. Authority came from either the gods or the laws of nature. Rulers, for example, were allegedly chosen by the gods. Things were forbidden because the gods said so, or because the laws of nature supposedly said so. The Ten Commandments, for example, forbade people to murder. Why? Because God said so. One of the biggest revolutions of the modern era was to shift the source of authority away from the alleged laws of the gods and of nature to the feelings of human beings. Modern day rulers are not chosen by God, they are elected by people according to their feelings. And note that in democratic elections, people are asked not what is the truth, but rather what do you feel. That's why all people are given an equal vote. Some people may be more intelligent than others, and certain people may understand physics and biology better than others. But all humans have a similar capacity to feel, and that is why they are entitled to the same voting rights. The pains and joys of an illiterate person are as important as the pains and joys of a Nobel Prize winner. As for forbidding things like murder or rape, the reason is not that God said so or some ancient book said so. We forbid these things because they make people suffer. To understand this shift in authority from external laws to internal feelings, we can look at cases of so called victimless crimes, crimes that do not cause anyone to suffer. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam famously banned homosexuality. Why? Because God said so, because scriptures said so, or because allegedly it was a crime against the laws of nature. For thousands of years, for one man to fall in love with another man was one of the worst crimes imaginable, sometimes punished by death. In the modern world, people began questioning this taboo. They asked, who suffers? If two men love each other, how does this harm anyone? And if nobody suffers, why should it be considered a crime? Ethics and politics are no longer about divine commandments or about alleged laws of nature. They are about feelings. Even religious zealots who oppose homosexuality have shifted their arguments accordingly, at least when they want to influence public opinion. To take an example from my home country of Israel, every year the Israeli LGBT community holds a gay pride parade in Jerusalem. Since LGBT people are often excluded from public spaces, threatened by humiliation and even violence, the parade is meant to demonstrate that they are equal and valued members of society who should feel safe and honored in public. Yet, the Jerusalem parade seldom goes unchallenged. Fundamentalist Jews, Muslims, and Christians who quarrel with each other throughout the year find a common cause on this one day and fume in accord against the LGBT parade. What's really interesting, however, is the arguments they use. The religious zealots do not say these sinners shouldn't hold a gay parade because God forbids homosexuality. No, the zealots explain to every available microphone and television camera that seeing a gay pride parade passing through the holy city of Jerusalem hurts our feelings. Just as LGBT people want us to respect their feelings, they should respect our feelings. So in this case, to determine whether it's okay to hold a gay parade in Jerusalem, we need to weigh one feeling against another feeling. Some people will feel humiliated and even endangered if we ban the parade. Other people will feel hurt if we allow the parade. Which feelings count for more? This is not the place to answer this question, but the key takeaway for our purpose is that in the modern world, many ethical and political conflicts pit one feeling against another feeling. Consider another scenario featuring the statue of a dead leader that is placed in a prominent public square. Some people demand to remove the statue because they see it as an offensive racist symbol. Other people object, claiming that for them it signifies pride in their own group identity. Assuming that both sides are sincere, the argument again boils down to the question, whose feelings count for more? If a statue makes some people feel threatened or ignored, while making other people feel proud and valued, how do we weigh these feelings against each other? Such conflicts raise the more general question of how we measure feelings and how we measure suffering. Much of modern ethics and modern politics revolve around the attempt to measure and scale suffering. I mentioned earlier that politics can help us make sense of the various scientific theories of consciousness. One question I would ask about any theory of consciousness is, can it help us measure suffering? Can it help us formulate a scale of suffering? If it cannot, I would doubt whether it is truly a theory of consciousness. One very important part of any scale of suffering is the lowest end of the scale, zero capacity for suffering. Zero capacity for suffering means that you fall completely outside the ethical and political domain. For instance, in the aforesaid debate about the statue, we take into account the feelings of people who abhor the statue, and we take into account the feelings of people who admire the statue, but we don't take into account the feelings of the statue itself, because the statue has no feelings. When it's up on its pedestal, it doesn't feel happy. If you cut off its head and throw it in a ditch, it doesn't feel pain. So the statue itself is not an ethical and political subject. It is merely an object. This is why the questions of who is conscious and who can feel something and who can suffer are extremely important political questions.
In just the time you've been watching this video. But here's the kicker. You're only conscious of about 40 of those 2 to 11 million pieces of information a second. So what the heck? That doesn't really add up. You're right. It's because the other 90% is not coming from the conscious mind, which you're listening to this video on right now. It's coming from your subconscious mind. This controls your life, whether you know it or not. In fact, you don't even know it's happening because by definition, that would mean it's conscious, not subconscious. So why does this matter? Well, here's the biggest kept secret, I believe, in making change in your life and attracting things to you that you want. People go after studying, memorizing habits, willpower, new routines, new years. And that's why 80% of people fail by the second week of February if you look at their New Year's resolutions. I'm guilty myself. Where people miss out is the other 90% that they could be accessing in your subconscious mind. What if you could tap into that? Instead of using 10%, what if you could use 90? In this video, I want to share with you a 3-minute subconscious mind exercise. Once you know this, there's no going back. Something you can do every day to reprogram your subconscious mind. Start using the full power. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist by any means, but I geek out on this stuff and I love it. The subconscious mind, the brain, and all that. And here's what I found. Let's use the example of money. If you grew up hearing money is scarce, money is the root of all evil, money doesn't grow on trees, or your parents thought about money a lot, that's one of the worst things you can do to a kid if you want your kid to be rich, because that's going to strengthen the neural pathways in your brain that's reinforcing the lack of money and that you're not supposed to have any. Hebb's law says that neurons that fire together wire together. So naturally, you're going to start noticing lack. And then when you get into your adulthood, your checking account has $20 in it because your whole life you've seen lack. But if you're conscious of that, that's where you can make this change. And most of us don't choose what we put in our subconscious mind. Again, that would be conscious by definition. Unfortunately, most of it's not even our choice at all. It's influence from society, programs, our parenting, emotional events that sometimes weren't our choice, could be trauma. Really, up until the age of 7 to 14, it's when you're like a sponge absorbing everything into your mind. And so most people walk around life like a 14-year-old because that's kind of where their mind is. If that makes sense. In fact, the Jesuits had a good saying that sums this up. It says, "Give me a boy till the age of 7 and I will show you the man." So this 3-minute mind exercise is designed to go back, rewind the clock, and really put in stuff and become conscious of what your subconscious is giving you in your life. Full credit, I got this from You Are Creators. I believe that's your YouTube channel. Yeah, You Are Creator. But I put my own spin on it, and this is just what works for me. Here's how to do this. The first thing you're going to do is I want you to take a series of deep breaths, 4 to 5 of these. You're going to go in for 4 seconds, hold, and then out for 4 seconds. And what this does is it puts your mind in a very calm state. You need to be calm, otherwise this exercise will not work for you. So many times we drink energy drinks, we get so stressed out about the bills we got to pay, about driving here, and we're just like on the verge of stress all day long, whether you realize it or not. In fact, the internal mind chatter you have going on and on and on, if we're really honest, how many times a day do you have self-doubts? How many times a day does your mind perk up and say, hey, you're not good enough. Hey, they think you're stupid. Hey, all this stuff. Like if that was a person following you around saying that stuff, turn around and give them one of these, right? It's annoying. Step number 2, you're going to take one hand and place it on your forehead, okay? This is connecting to your third eye right here. In the realm of chakras, we're not going to go into that in this video. That's a very spiritual higher self place. With your other hand, you're going to put it in the back on your occipital lobe. This is responsible for vision. So what you're doing here is you're sending energetic cues to yourself to what you're about to do, what you want to see in your life. You'll notice that just doing that feels good. You're putting your energy there. Third step, I want you to either write this down, think about it, say it out loud, a specific desire. Anything you want. This could be an emotion you want to feel, whether that's love, higher self-worth, more confidence, just feel like an overall badass. This could be a physical thing, new car, more money, new place you want to move into. Or it could be an experience. You want to see yourself going somewhere hot. You want a vacation. You want to travel. What this is doing is calling that thing into your mind. So let me give you an example here. About a year ago, I really wanted a new car. I was using the same car my whole life, and it was just time for an upgrade. I upgraded a lot of things. I typically live well below my means, but it was just time for a car. But I didn't really want the flashy Lambos and luxury cars that everyone likes. It's just not my style. One day, I saw a classic car driving by. It was a 65 Mustang Fastback, and I heard the engine. I smelled the exhaust. It was so close. I saw the color of the car, the classic looking interior, the classic look. I knew that that was the car I wanted. So I would call that into my mind. I would think about that car. I became obsessed with it. I would go on YouTube. I would hear the sound of 289 engines. I could feel my hands on the wood steering wheel. I could smell the premium gas you put in that car to take care of it. Add as many senses to this as you can. Most people with visualization, they just try and see it. They see it, they see it, they see it. But you're missing out on the bigger picture. The more real you can make this to you, the better this will work. What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you hear? What do you see? Use all your senses there. It'll get easier if you do this more and more. You should try this every day for 21 days and watch what happens. Pretty soon you can just instantly call that back into your mind. Step number 4, what you're going to do is state the name of the thing out loud. So in this case, it would be 1965 Ford Mustang. Take 1 to 3 minutes to keep stating this thing out loud as you're calling it into your mind, pressing your hands on your head. Really try to identify 3 to 5 specificities that this item has. In the case of the car, it was the steering wheel, it was the smell, and it was the sound of the engine. this should feel pretty freaking good. Remember, emotions are just a record of the past. So if you have the emotion right now, well, guess what? You've already experienced the thing. So when you get it, it's going to be really familiar and easier to get because you already know how the emotions are going to feel when it comes to you. The next step is you're going to declare this to be true. State the thing out loud and say, this is my new truth and my new reality. Say that with as much certainty as you can. The more truth that you have to this thing with you, your brain will work because you believe it to be true. You need to be in alignment with what you think and what you do, so you'll start doing things to get this thing to you. Lastly, you can open your eyes. Breathe in and out 4 times, just like you started this. So in through the nose 4 seconds, hold, and then out. Hold it, and out. You might want to nod your head yes, or say the word yes out loud when you're doing that. Again, you're reinforcing the certainty, you're reinforcing this truth. You want to write down those steps. All in all, this should take about 3 to 7 minutes every day. I challenge you to do that with the same desire for 21 days every day at the same time and watch what starts to happen in your life. Really important that you do it at the same time in the same place. I do my meditation in that corner by my books in my office every day, and I kind of associate that corner. It's much easier for me to get in that meditative state. The last step of this is smashing the heck out of that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with those bell notifications set to on. And in the link below, I will link down our free course that I put together for you. It's
The no sugar added option actually has more sugar. Okay, guys, I'm going to sneak you into an average grocery store. You see, Americans in particular.
Now we learn how we see and the link between the
mind-gut connection
nutrition.
is something that people have intuitively known for a long time, but science has only, I would say, in the last few years, gotten a grasp and acceptance of this concept. It essentially means that your brain has intimate connections with the gut and another entity in our gut, the second brain, which is about 100 million nerve cells that are sandwiched in between the layers of the gut. And they can do a lot of things on their own in terms of regulating our digestive processes. But there's a very intimate conversation between that little brain, the second brain in the gut, and our main brain. They use the same neurotransmitters, they're connected by nerve pathways. And so we have really an integrated system from our brain, the little brain of the gut, and it goes in both directions. The little brain or the second brain in the gut, you're not able to see it because it's, as I said, it's spread out through the entire length of the gut from your esophagus to the end of your large intestine, several layers of nerve cells interconnected. And what they do is, even if you can do this in animal experiments, if you completely disconnect this little brain in the gut from your main brain, this little brain can completely take care of all the digestive processes, the contractions, peristaltic reflex, regulation of blood flow in the intestine. And it has many sensors, so it knows exactly what's going on inside the gut, what goes on in the wall of the gut, any distension, any chemicals. All of this is being picked up by these sensory nerves, fed into the enteric nervous system, the second brain, and then the second brain generates these stereotypic responses. So when you vomit, when you have diarrhea, when you have normal digestion, all of this is encoded in programs in your second brain. What the second brain can't do, it cannot generate any conscious perceptions or gut feelings. That really is the only ability that allows us to do this and perceive all the stuff that goes on inside of us is really the big brain and the specific areas within and circuits within the brain that process information that comes up from the gut. Still, most of that information is not really consciously perceived. So 95% of all this massive amount of information coming from the gut is processed integrated with other inputs that the brain gets from the outside, from smell, visual stimuli. And only a very small portion is then actually made conscious. So when you feel good after a meal, or when you ate the wrong thing and you're nauseated, those are the few occasions where actually we realize or become aware of our gut feelings, even though a lot of other stuff is going on in this brain gut axis all the time. When we talk about the connection between depression and the gut, there's some very intriguing observations, both clinically but also now more recently scientifically, that make it highly plausible that there's an intricate connection between serotonin in the gut, serotonin in our food, depression, and gut function. So on a clinical level, there's a connection because many patients with depression also complain of constipation, so a distinct dysfunction of the gut. And often the medications that people with depression take, particularly serotonin reuptake inhibitors such as Prozac and all the other drugs in this category, they often cause transient gastrointestinal dysfunction. So that's on the clinical level. However, what makes it particularly interesting, and still an open question really, more than 95% of all the serotonin we have in our organism is really produced and stored in the gut in specialized cells, so-called enterochromaffin cells. So our major, by far the largest store of that molecule that plays such a big role in modulating our mood and our well-being, also appetite, pain, sensitivity, is stored in the gut. And a lot of very interesting discoveries have been made more recently that makes this even more intriguing. So this serotonin is synthesized in the gut from precursors that come from our food that we ingest. And the microbes that live in the gut are actually able, through chemicals that they produce, to stimulate the production of serotonin. It's been estimated based on study in animals that 60% of the production is due to these signals that come from the microbes that live in our gut. So it's, in addition, another intriguing finding is that these serotonin cells, so they're sandwiched in between the cells that make the lining of the gut. One end sticks into the inside, samples everything that goes on inside the gut. The other side, very interestingly, has an outgrowth which connects it through a synapse with sensory nerve endings. So many vagal nerve endings. So this is a cell that sticks into the gut, samples a lot of things that go on in our digestive tract. Then it produces serotonin, largely through the influence of microbes that live in our gut. And then the signal, when this cell is activated, there's many things, chemical or mechanical stimuli associated with digestion. It signals through the synapse directly into our brain through the vagus nerve, into centers that have to do with, ultimately with emotional regulation and emotion generation. So
our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors, and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals. Our brain requires a great deal of energy to operate, particularly when we have to concentrate and think about something. Problem solving or making a decision not only uses more brain energy, it also can be a slow process. So our brain seeks to conserve energy by developing efficient ways of operating. One way it does this is through conscious and subconscious processing. Our brain seeks to automate much of what we do to save us time and brain energy. These are our brain's subconscious processes. They take care of our basic life functioning, our fight or flight response, and our learned behaviors and habits. We don't really think about these things. They just happen on autopilot or have become second nature. In fact, up to 95% of all our behaviors and reactions happen at the subconscious level. Our subconscious is also involved in the recording and storing of our experiences and knowledge, forming our memories. These are stored in our brain like photos in a picture album, which we can refer back to later. The way we think and feel about these experiences forms a frame around the photo. This is how we give people, objects, or events meaning. Over time, this is how our attitudes develop. For the most part, our subconscious processes help us navigate the world efficiently. Yet sometimes we might develop unhelpful habits or attitudes that prevent us from achieving our goals. This is where more conscious thinking can benefit us. Our conscious processing involves our higher thinking capacity, where we can be more mindful and considered in what we think, feel, and do. We can use conscious thinking to reprogram our subconscious and change our thoughts, attitudes, and habits. Well,
เมื่อคุณช็อปสิ่งที่ชอบที่ลาซาด้าคุณกำลังเพิ่ม
Suppose you fall asleep. Suddenly you become unaware of all these things, isn't it? Right now, you are aware who is sitting next to you for some moment. Now I am talking to you. You become unaware who is sitting next to you, isn't it? So what you're aware of, what you're unaware of is varying. The sphere and the area of your awareness is varying at different times, isn't it? You're not always aware to the same extent. Whether it's about the outside or the inside, you are not always aware to the same extent. When we talk awareness, we are not talking about becoming more and more aware about the outside. That is only for survival. To the extent it is necessary for survival, we must be aware of the outside. See, if you take the animals, for example, your dog. First of all, why dog entered your life? Today maybe for other purposes, but initially why dog entered your life is he's much more aware than you about the outside, isn't it? If you fall asleep, he still keeps hearing and smelling and tasting and everything around him. That's why you keep the dog at home, isn't it? Today maybe for companionship because people have abandoned you. But otherwise, fundamentally, dog came into our lives because he's more aware of the outside than you are, isn't it? He can see things and smell things and hear things that you cannot. That's the reason why he's come into your life. But we are not talking about that kind of awareness. When we say awareness, we are talking about you being aware of yourself. So how much of you is in your awareness right now? If you look at it, you will see very small aspects of you are in your awareness. So we have to deepen this process. If awareness has to grow,
to answer a challenging question in our next section called Question Time.
So now we know all about human brain revolution. I think you will get a lot of information to know how to developing and how to fix when you have brain problem. Let's see my Shana and I will get you more study about our brain and consciousness with meditation, how to fix everything to eat healthy, sleep well, sleep enough, good food, good exercise, meditation. I get that's one will make you live longer, and the brain always will wish you with a good capacity and quality. See you next.